Turns out even the billionaires, James, have to queue to get into an event like this.
How vulgar.
One billionaire didn't have to queue. One Elon Musk, straight in, past the Secret Service.
He's so new money. Hello and welcome to day 32 of Trump100 with me, James Matthews.
And me, Mark Stone.
Coming up, I've spent the day on Capitol Hill asking America's politicians, Republicans and Democrats, what they think of where their president is going with this conflict in Ukraine.
Because Donald Trump has sent Europe into a tailspin by calling Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelenskyy a dictator, not once, but twice.
World politics, Mark, are moving fast, but we have to start in Miami, where you are, and where President Trump has been addressing this Saudi-backed business conference. In his speech, not for the first time, he denigrated the Ukrainian President, Volodymyr Zelenskyy.
A dictator without elections. Zelenskyy better move fast or he's not going to have a country left. Got to move fast because that war is going in the wrong direction. In the meantime, we're successfully negotiating an end to the war with Russia, something I'll admit that only Trump is going to be able to do in the Trump administration. We're going to be able to do it. I think Putin even admitted that.
Yeah, that was Donald Trump speaking a few hours before we started recording an evening speech to an auditorium full of delegates from around the world who were here to listen to his views on investment. And we wondered whether he would bring up the Truth Social post that he had made hours earlier, where he had, as you say, called Zelenskyy a dictator. Not only did he bring it up, but as you heard there, he doubled down. He effectively read out the Truth Social post and then expanded on it. And what struck me was not only did he call Zelenskyy a dictator, but he had nothing negative to say about the guy who invaded Ukraine, about Vladimir Putin. Yeah, I think if anyone was in any doubt about just how extraordinary it is for Donald Trump, President Trump, to call President Zelenskyy a dictator, you only have to head to the Twitter account of Dmitry Medvedev, the one-time president of Russia, and he tweeted about the dictator comments. If you told me 3 months ago that these were the words of a US president, I would have laughed out loud. He then goes on to say, Donald Trump is 200% right. Bankrupt clown. So there is still a key player in Russia, very close to Vladimir Putin, firmly agreeing with the American president. It's remarkable what Donald Trump has been saying today.
President Trump, he also claimed that the United States had given Ukraine $350 billion to go into a war that couldn't be won. Mark, you've been doing some digging into that number, yeah?
Yeah, look, whether it's misinformation or disinformation, the claim is wrong. Congress has spent $183 billion between 2022 and 2024, according to Ukraine Oversight, which is a US government organization. And of that, direct military support to Ukraine in Ukraine totaled about $70 billion. The rest, though, has been spent in America on Ukraine, ramping up weapons factories, training Ukrainian forces, humanitarian assistance, the increased cost of surging US forces into Europe. So it's money that's not been spent in Ukraine, but that's led Trump surrogates like Elon Musk to claim that the money has somehow gone missing. US officials, though, who are not part of the Trump administration, are saying that it isn't missing. It just wasn't spent in Ukraine. So all of this feeds into this sense that in so many areas, Donald Trump is peddling stuff that's not true. And I think that is what led Volodymyr Zelenskyy to issue his statement earlier on Wednesday, where he said that Trump is living in a kind of disinformation bubble. And that then prompted this broadside from Trump.
Yeah, and Donald Trump, he'd already used the D word earlier on his Truth Social account. And that, subsequently set off this war of words.
We were discussing the other day, James, about how who would be the first person to call out Donald Trump. Well, we now know it's Zelenskyy. But then, as a consequence of that, European leaders have felt compelled to jump to his defense. Germany's Chancellor Olaf Scholz has called Trump's claims simply wrong and dangerous. And Starmer has spoken as well, I think.
Yeah, the UK Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer, due in Washington, of course, next week. He's spoken to Zelenskyy. to contradict President Trump. These are the words of a number 10 spokesperson saying it's perfectly reasonable for elections to be suspended in wartime, as of course they were in the UK during the Second World War. Starmer in DC next week. Somebody else who's due here is the French President Macron. The difficulty, of course, both will have is where to begin with Donald Trump. Where do you start with a president whose claims over the past 48 hours and more have been fact-checked beyond credibility, certainly fact-checked beyond their stance and their understanding of where the situation lies?
Very, very tricky diplomatic position that Keir Starmer is in as he heads to Washington. Interestingly, his ambassador to the United States, Lord Mandelson, was here in Miami today, was in the room listening to Donald Trump. I'd love to know what he made of the speech. I did catch a few words with Lord Mandelson, tight-lipped, as you might expect.
Ambassador? Sorry?
Very interesting speech.
Interesting. Yeah, the Prime Minister's got his work cut out next week.
Be a good visit. We're looking forward to it.
What's your view on his assessment that Zelenskyy is a dictator?
I'm not going to comment on this, as you know, Mark.
Thank you, sir.
Words with the British ambassador. Well done, Mark. Anybody else there that you caught up with?
Well, you know the funny thing, I'm sure you'll appreciate this, but when you're in a crowded room, you're trying to get doorsteps with different people, trying to get a few words with different people. Sometimes you spot people and you think you recognize them. You know that they are, in a position of power in one way or another, but you can't quite remember where you know them from. And that happened to me. I saw someone, I knew I'd seen him before, introduced myself, started talking to him, heard the Italian accent, realized it was a former Italian prime minister, but I couldn't quite remember which one. In the end, I remembered it was Matteo Renzi, who was prime minister when I was living in Europe, now a senator in the Italian parliament.
Yeah, nothing worse in an interview with somebody who you don't recognize when they're giving you their time, they're giving you their answers, and at the end, you have to ask them, I'm sorry, who are you? The trick is you don't ask them who they are, you say, remind me how to spell your name.
Oh, good one. The other person I spotted was the FIFA boss, Gianni Infantino.
He's a football man, Mark.
Thank you, James. Yeah. Interestingly, Trump rather likes him. He's been at quite a few Trump events. I think it's got something to do with the fact the World Cup is here soon, and Trump's cozying up to him. He was sitting a couple of seats away from Elon Musk in the crowd as they were listening to Donald Trump. So, I saw him afterwards. I thought I may as well ask him. And so I said, what do you make of the speech? Interesting, he said. Then I said, what do you make of the comments about Zelenskyy being a dictator? And he looked at me like I was mad. And he said, I'm the boss of FIFA.
I thought you were going to say, who does Zelenskyy play for? But Donald Trump, of course, used to be a football player, soccer player at New York Military Academy. Very sporty. Baseball was his game, actually. In fact, he was a pitcher so good that scouts actually came to watch him. But I've seen the team group, Donald Trump, front row, holding the soccer ball. So sporty guy, he's a big football fan, and he calls it his World Cup, of course.
Anyway, James, back in DC, you have been on Capitol Hill. I'm fascinated to know how many of the people in Trump's orbit, whether they be actually in the White House or whether they be in the wider Republican Party orbit, how many of them agree with his statement that Zelenskyy is a dictator. Because remember, the Republican Party not all that long ago was very supportive of Ukraine.
Yeah, and you hear Republicans dissenting from the Trump line. Today, J.D. Vance, he was hosting a lunch on Capitol Hill with Republican senators. I went to Capitol Hill to catch up with some of the people who were in the room. This is the Ohio clock corridor. Because of the Ohio clock, not far from here, J.D. Vance, the vice president, he's having a lunch with Republican senators. Vance himself, he was being kept away from the cameras. So we headed to where senators have their offices, a basement corridor. You get to it via an underground monorail. It's a sort of Butlins Capitol Hill type arrangement. Quite the journey, this. And of course, in this place, interconnected by walkway and by train, there are senators, representatives all over the place. And this is the Russell Building, the office complex for Congress people. It's where we caught up with a couple who'd been at the lunch. As they were heading back to their offices, I caught up with Democratic Senator Ed Markey and Republican Lindsey Graham. He'd not long since spoken to President Zelenskyy. Can we ask you a quick question? Would you mind? Ukraine.
Not right now, we're rushing on
Ukraine,
slides.
It's an easy one. Tell me, what do you make of, of Sky News in the UK? What do you make of where Donald Trump is right now on Ukraine and what he's had to say, calling Zelenskyy a dictator?
Donald Trump is the master of the big lie. He believes if he says it enough that people will believe him. The biggest lie is that Ukraine invaded Russia. No, Russia invaded Ukraine.
I don't consider Zelenskyy a dictator, but we do need elections. Putin is truly a dictator. What you have to do here is find a conclusion to the war that will not lead to a third invasion. I think there's one person that Putin really is afraid of, and that's Trump. If you ever get a good deal on Ukraine, it'll be because Trump created a sense of dread by Russia.
That Graham interview was illuminating, I thought, Mark. He
too.
contradicts Trump on the dictator line. And I wonder, is that a friendly voice in Zelenskyy's ear, the makings, perhaps, of some kind of way into Trump world, a transatlantic bridge? Maybe.
I thought Lindsey Graham's comments were very interesting. And I think, honestly, whether you're sitting in Kyiv, a politician in Kyiv, or in any European capital right now, you are looking for those Republican voices who are close to Trump, but not Trump, who are Republican, but not in the White House, and just calling them privately and saying, what are we to make of this? And I do think that it's a perfectly valid and open question right now to wonder whether or not Trump's America actually has Europe's back, whether or not Trump's America is genuinely part of NATO. It feels almost as though Donald Trump has walked out of NATO without actually leaving NATO. And that sort of centerpiece of NATO, the Article 5, that an attack on one country is an attack on all, and that all countries will come to that country's defense. I just wonder whether in Trump's America, that still stands.
Yeah, and the business of how quickly this is all happening, and the question that then arises about coordination. How long has this perhaps been in the planning? Trump has always been coy about his contacts with Vladimir Putin, but things are happening at a pace and what seems to be a mutual understanding between the United States and Russia that does raise the question, has there been coordination over time? And it's a bigger question. If Russia's interests are baked into some kind of plan that has been a while in the making, that has been coordinated between Washington and Moscow to any degree, raises big questions, probably bigger than the ones that are being asked right now.
And James, while all this was going on today down here, the White House's official Instagram account decided to get involved in some light trolling by posting a mocked-up Time magazine cover showing Donald Trump in a crown with the words, "Long live the King." Wow.
Yeah, classic Trump, I suppose. But Mark, every time I go on social media, I think to myself, what this social media site needs is a picture of me, full frame, staring down the barrel with a crown on my head. Luckily, I've got a voice in my ear saying, "Behave yourself, Matthews." Clearly, that voice doesn't reach the White House. Donald Trump, king of the world as he sees it. Who knows? Might not be too long.
King of the world, certainly calling the shots and creating a huge amount of angst as well.
Okay, that's almost it for today, but please do keep sending us your questions to Trump100@sky.uk. We're going to be answering as many as we can in our weekend Q&A episode. So anything you want to know about America, President Trump, or US politics generally, just ask away.
And as always, please do follow the podcast wherever you're listening. Write us a review or share with a friend.
But for now, thanks for joining us for day 32 of Trump100. We'll be back tomorrow for day 33. We're almost a third of the way through.
Phew.
Getting
there.
there.
See you tomorrow.
All the best.